Pass on what you have learned.
From a galaxy far, far away, this is the Generations of Star Wars podcast.
This is the Generations of Star Wars podcast. Welcome to the show. We're excited to spend a little more time on some hobby horses that we have since there's not a lot of news this week. I'm Scott, and Dante is with me as always. What's up, Dante?
Not too much. Ready to dig into some Star Wars.
Okay, so in this week's show, we're going to do a few different things, spend a little more time on things we normally wouldn't, since there's not a lot of news, which is coming off of last week where there was a ton of news. This is a little bit of a calm before the storm because we're going to have some books coming out shortly, obviously, and then there's going to be at some point a Blu-ray DVD release for Rogue One, which we can anticipate that probably before or adjacent with or right after Celebration, and then of course the big one, Celebration, coming up. So as well as Rebels, their hiatus should be over in a couple more weeks, so it's a little bit of a drought. So we're going to spend some more time on a couple other projects. One thing we'll be doing right alongside Celebration, probably right after Celebration, we're going to start a series of monthly film reviews that are we're going to review the movies that are the inspiration for Episode 8. Now, back in July, Rian Johnson had listed 6 films that had been a large inspiration for him in the creation, writing, and directing process of Episode 8. Those films were 12 O'Clock High, A Letter Never Sent, Bridge on the River Kwai, Sahara, the 1943 version, Gunga Din, and 3 Outlaw Samurai. Now, obviously, those are all movies from the classical era of film, and Rian Johnson is very much steeped in classical movie knowledge. He knows it well. And what we'll do is we'll talk about what from those films we might expect to see them borrowing in the process of the creation of Episode 8. Some things he's already mentioned, and we'll discuss those things, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of a foresight of trying to project how it might show up on the screen. And the reason for doing it after Celebration is we should have a trailer of some sort by then, a teaser at least, and much more clarity about the film itself, what to expect. And subsequently, at the end of January, he did reveal another film in an interview that was Hitchcock's film To Catch a Thief. And so there are actually 7 that we're aware of that he has listed as inspiring his efforts to create Episode 8. So we'll do that series, and we'll tackle one of those films each month and kind of unpack it and see what we come up with. So we thoughts about that, Dante, with Rian Johnson's.
I think it makes sense that those are the films that he's picked, and I'm excited to watch them, especially the Hitchcock movie and the 12 Samurai.
3 Outlaw Samurai.
3 Outlaw Samurai.
12 O'Clock High.
And I'm just excited to review some movies. Cool.
And along with that, we may have other items that we decide to review. Obviously, we're still Dante's at the halfway point almost. Well, we're going to be getting close to ending series 1 of Gendy's Clone Wars review, and then we'll tackle the very end of the first series and beginning of the second series next week. So that's coming here at the end of this week's podcast. We'll discuss several episodes. Before that, I'm going to do 2 segments here that have to do with Star Wars and art, and the first of them has to do with Camille Paglia's book Glittering Images, A Journey Through Art from Egypt to Star Wars. This is her book. It's not a very thick book. She said she specifically did not want to make it a thick book that was ridiculous, that people couldn't access. She wanted to make it very accessible. And it is very readable for someone of her education. She is a university professor of humanities and media studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. And this book is, as she mentions her personal survey, she picks a piece of art here and there throughout the centuries that she feels is a fair representation of great art at that time. Not necessarily saying this or that one is the best, but in all situations. But in particular, she earmarks for the our contemporary times, and this book was written in 2012. The Revenge of the Sith as her choice. Now, she's been highly criticized not only for this, but also for a lot of her opinions. She tends to be very polarizing, and often has been accused of just making statements to get eyes on her work, which may or may not be the case. There was a show called A Slice of Sci-Fi. It's a YouTube show, and they completely ripped her. And when I watched their review, this was in 2012, not long after this book was released, and this was in the Star Wars news of the time. They ripped her. There were 4 or 5 individuals on this show, and they really didn't have any arguments. But just as if you were just to hear that statement out of the ether, just that, hey, an art critic says that Revenge of the Sith is the greatest piece of art in the last 30 years. How would that, I mean, when you first heard about that, you heard it a little more in context, but if you just heard it without the context that was provided, what would you think?
I'd kind of be surprised. Like, a lot of times it's forgotten that movies are an art and it's more of entertainment at this point. And to hear a movie as controversial as Revenge of the Sith was, especially the fans, to be called the greatest piece of art in the last, how many years?
30 years. That's
quite the statement, given that there are a lot of fantastic films that have come out in that era, and that's just film. So hearing that out of the blue, I would be really, really shocked, and then would want to hear her arguments for it, because, like I said, that's a very controversial claim, especially because it's Star Wars, and that's polarizing all over the place.
Well, I found it interesting in a lot of the criticisms that I came across, and you can Google it and find more information. There are people thinking that it's pretty outlandish at the time. Now we've had a few years, and my particular reason for bringing this back up is where I'm going. But it relates to our show's theme in general, that the generations of Star Wars, that it has lasting power, Star Wars, and why does it? And the beginning of her book, she asks the question, why does great art last? And that's why does it stand the test of time? And that is a very good question to ask for anything that we appreciate and value. Now, the context, she sets it in the context of George Lucas's accomplishments. Now, she says that no one has closed the gap between art and technology more successfully than George Lucas. That's a quote from her book on page 181, the chapter on Revenge of the Sith. She says, in his 6-film Star Wars saga, he fused ancient hero legends from East and West with futuristic science fiction and created characters who have entered the dream lives of millions. He constructed a vast, original, self-referential mythology. So, and then she goes on to list his specific achievements of, when you look at, for Revenge of the Sith itself, we'll get into that, but she talks about his development of different camera styles, like with in A New Hope, he obviously had to create new technology for camera making to make the ships look like they're flying as smoothly as they do. Instead of moving the models, they move the cameras and so on and so forth. And then you have, obviously Industrial Light and Magic, you have Skywalker Sound, you have LucasArts, you have a whole list of advancements in everything from movies and home theater with THX, which ended up spawning the whole home theater battle between Dolby and Sony and all these other companies, just battling to come up with the best home theater system. That battle still rages today. Well, in large part, that's because of THX. And then, of course, humanitarian wise, he's done quite a bit as a philanthropist. But so she lists those accomplishments, and then she gets into Revenge of the Sith. She talks about these aspects. Now, she likes the platform that Obi-Wan and Anakin fight on in the final act, and she most of her praise for this film is weighted on the final act, the third act, and the platform itself, which took 8 months to create. She considers it to be worthy to be thought of as installation art itself. Then she talks about the emotional roller coaster of the third act. You have multiple betrayals going on. You have the death of Anakin in the birth of Darth Vader. You have the birth of Hope in the death of Padme. Those simultaneous birth sequences with the aid of droids, of course, which again is that little bit of self-referential idea that Lucas is always valuing technology and its possibilities. And then you have the departure sequences with Yoda and Obi-Wan in exile, and then you have babies that arrive with their new families, seen against beautiful landscapes with strong, and this was a point she specifically made, strong men treating babies tenderly. And when you put all that together, she felt like it was the only piece of art that stood up to the art of the ages going back, thousands of years. So it is quite a claim. And when you hear all that in context and hear how she unpacks all that, what are your thoughts?
I think that quite the case has been made for that specifically the third act being the greatest piece of art in the last 30 years. And I don't necessarily know whether or not I agree with her yet, but it is very much an interesting point, and a point that I will mull over for a while. Just going back to the model, I always loved watching the behind the scenes of how they made the models, because they were very meticulous in making those models and sets. And I don't know. I think it's still a very large claim, but I think that it definitely has a place in an argument. Like it is definitely a point to be contested.
Like what I like is that she's talking about how so many things are happening in such a short amount of time. When she talks about the multiple betrayals, I mean, of course you have, Anakin betrays everybody, and you get to see it all unpacked individually. It betrays the Jedi Order, betrays Padme, betrays Obi-Wan, like specific relationships. Betrays himself. That's a good one. You multiple levels. Then you also see how the Jedi Order betrayed him when they put him in the situation that he was in, and you see how, in because of who Palpatine is and how Machiavellian he is, and he exhibits a lot of the when you look at psychology and you look at the dark triad, which are basically things that talk about a sociopath and someone who's highly manipulative to his own ends and narcissistic. He betrays him because he's definitely not looking out for his best as he says he's going to, you have all these multiple levels of betrayal. Then you also have like multiple levels of destruction, the destruction of industry on Mustafar, the destruction of politics when they're literally throwing these pods at each other, Palpatine and Yoda in the Senate chamber. And so you have that. It's just very complex, I guess, more than I thought of before.
There are multiple levels to it, and I think that adds into the emotional weight of what's happening because we know how it ends up, and the fact that it's basically like everything is going downhill for everyone except Palpatine. And he's finally reached what he's been waiting for a very long time, and I think the levels and layers that are in that just add to the impact of that entire third act.
Yeah. So yeah, it is very, very complicated, and I think George Lucas on that third act did a phenomenal job of tying it all together. That it comes out very beautifully when you think of it in that light, and then the multiple births and the multiple deaths that occur, very not only deaths of people but deaths of like the entire Jedi Order, and it's just it's very, very, very well articulated. Well, that brought me thinking in another direction, and of course she says in the past 30 years from that point, the greatest work of art she considers to be Revenge of the Sith. And I was thinking about A New Hope and how it ushered in Star Wars in a time before there was Star Wars. It was the first film that was released in the sequence of time. Obviously, it falls in the middle point chronologically of the first two trilogies. But my question is, what movie? Let's just say movie, but I could say what other piece of art. But what other movie can be said to be as widely recognizable on as many levels as A New Hope? And think about that question, because I'm gonna talk about kind of how recognizable it is, and then see if you can think of any movie or franchise that even comes close. You can talk about the chemistry within the cast and the ensemble of Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and Mark Hamill. How well that comes across in the movement of the film. The story told in the classic hero's journey epic tradition a la Joseph Campbell. Iconic dialogue. The Force is strong with this one. May the Force be with you. I have a bad feeling about this. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. You have the iconic costumes, with like the Jedi robes. You have Princess Leia's hair buns. You've got stormtroopers, not to mention Darth Vader. You have iconic props and their accompanying visual effects. Think of Han's blaster. You have lightsabers. You have TIE fighters and X-Wing fighters, the Millennium Falcon, especially with the cockpit view when it jumps into hyperspace, with the stars turning into streaking lines. You have the iconic sets like Lars Homestead, the Death Star, the interior of the Falcon. You have sound effects by the wizardry of Ben Burt, laser blast, the roar of the Falcon, screeching TIE fighters, buzzing, humming, and clashing lightsabers. And of course, by the way, there's a musical score written by a guy named John Williams, which ushered in kind of a renaissance of the classical style of film scores. And then you have, coming on the heels of all that, a massive merchandising chain. I mean, you have the amount of merchandise that it spawned, from everything from clothes, toys, lunchboxes, video games. It's astonishing. So when you think of that, and how on every single level it delivered in an iconic fashion. When people see the hair bun things that Leia had, it immediately takes you to that film, to the origins and the roots of Star Wars. The Falcon, immediately you see it. You see something that looks like, and you know how people post these pictures, how they say if you're a Star Wars fan, you can see it. Like they had the horizon, you see Jabba the Hutt. I mean, they'll have Yoda or a Mandalorian symbol.
They'll be driving through the storm and it looks like hyperspace.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many extremely recognizable, like it's immediately recognizable 2 notes, you know, of the Imperial March, and you hear it, and they play that at sports events, and you know, it's everywhere. And can you name any franchise or film or anything that has, on that many levels down the line, all these aspects of a film? Let's just say film. Can you think of any?
No, not really. I mean, anything you name, like Star Trek, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Lord of the Rings, anything you name, like even like, well, I was thinking of franchises, but yeah. E.T. too. Like any of these films that are automatically recognizable are not nearly as penetrating as Star Wars is. And I think the most recent thing, like even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is everywhere, but it's not to the level that Star Wars is. And I mean, time will tell for it, if whether or not it lasts, but I don't think it'll ever reach the level of Star Wars in permeating everything. And even like, you know, there's this constant war between Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars has the upper hand there. Sorry, Trekkies, but like even how everywhere Star Trek is, Star Wars just is over that. How much the MCU is everywhere, Star Wars is over that. Just Star Wars is everywhere, and there's nothing else to compare it to.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Marvel, what's one thing that jumps out to you when you're comparing it side by side that's not memorable?
The music.
Bingo. I mean, it's functional. It's fine.
Like the most recognizable music that the Marvel movies have is the Avengers theme, and that's it. Mm-hmm. They have, you know, the classic, you know, Avengers theme that they play in the 2 Avengers movies, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy did something that was fantastic with their score, but yeah, that's memorable in its own way. But it's not an original score. But original scores,
right? But that's borrowing from the work of others. So
it's fantastic.
it works. It totally works. The only one I could think comes close is The Wizard of Oz. It kind of hits on every level. It's iconic.
But
every level.
It's not as popular as Star Wars is at all.
No, but no. I would say that's a hard one, because it may not have the momentum it had, you know, over the years, but it comes roaring back every now and then. Everyone knows The Wizard of Oz. And you know, it has kind of more appeal on a younger age base. So you can get toddlers that. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that toddlers can't like Star Wars, because, I mean, obviously I got you. They do. But it's, you know what I'm saying. It's Wizard of Oz was designed more specifically to hit kind of that younger age, as well as a variety of ages. But you got music, you got the costumes, you got the sets, you had effects at that time. There were sound effects, and it was wizardry. Just kind of you had color was really emphasized. It really hit on a lot, and that's the only one I can think of that, as when you look at it as a work of art on editing, all the way down the line, it just hit, it delivered, and is iconic and memorable. Like when you see, what I'm trying to get at is it was Star Wars, and in this case Wizard of Oz also. When you see an image, it takes you no time at all. Immediately takes you, exactly what it came from, and it's easily recognizable. And the music as well. I mean, it's just got so. But I couldn't think of any others that even come close.
Well, I mean,
when you're talking about iconic,
yeah.
And
now that you mentioned the Wizard of Oz, I'm thinking of some of the old Disney films too, which really got up there and are still popular to this day. So
Mary Poppins.
Well, not even the live action, like all the classic animated
Jungle
Disney,
Book.
and then classic Pixar, like Incredibles is fantastic and stuff like that. But yeah, Star Wars still trumps it all, and now it's Disney, so Disney trumps all.
Yeah, I mean, when you have the visuals of the ships and the lightsabers and the sound of that, and then John Williams music, and then you have Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. I mean, it's just it's mind blowing how well it delivered and struck gold for George Lucas. So, all right, well that's my reflection on how iconic and memorable and immediately recognizable Star Wars: A New Hope specifically is, and how it is such a strong foundation for decades of not only films but animation, books, video games, and then merchandise down to lunchbox and sticker books, and I mean, you name it. It's just, it's huge. But so that's our homage to George Lucas. Thank the maker. Okay, so now we're going to close out the show with a longer look at Clone Wars. Dante, take it away. Take us home.
And we'll open up with Anakin in space. So we have the space battle that's kind of been going on in the background for a while in this this volume so far, and now we actually get kind of extended look at that, and we basically get to see Anakin blow up a lot of stuff. It kind of shows his cunning as a pilot, as a space pilot, just taking down droid ships, droid motherships, and then ultimately getting in a one-on-one battle with Asajj in her ship, which is both ships have a very interesting design aesthetically. They're they're drawn very beautifully, and then you just have Anakin is immediately drawn to, like, he has to take down this pilot because this is like a pilot that can actually combat his skills, because droid ships are a breeze for him. And so because of that, he starts following that ship, which is exactly what Asajj wants. And ultimately, he ends up disobeying Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan's like, no, don't single out one ship. You need to be up there with guiding your forces to take down all the ships, not just focusing in on one. Like, how much of a threat is one ship? And ultimately, Anakin disobeys him.
But I like... when the thing that jumped to my mind when I was watching the space battle part of it leading up is I felt like when I originally saw it the first time, it jumped in my mind was Obi-Wan's word to Luke. He was the best star pilot in the galaxy and a cunning warrior.
Yeah, he really proves himself in space, and I really like just that whole scene just because it's space dogfighting. And this is a point that I hit home a lot, but I am tired of people blowing up giant death weapons that blow up planets. They've done it 3 times. Like, I want more space battles, like space dogfighting.
4 times if you count the Trade Federation ship and how they were trying to make it be like a Death Star, but not a Death Star. Phantom Menace.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. But I loved what we got in Rogue One, because that was space dogfighting, basically, like ship to ship battle. It was phenomenal, and I love the ship to ship battle in this Clone Wars series. It's amazing. And then obviously Anakin follows Asajj. She hyperspaces out of there, and Anakin follows her, and somehow the clone, like Obi-Wan, got it back down on the planet.
Ship,
but, and he sends some clones after them, and then we cut to a different scene, and we'll get back to those characters. But now we get the Mace Windu scene.
Yes. The only place in either the old EU or anything canon, the only place where I like Mace is this. Everywhere else, I mean, I know he's where he fits in, and he fulfills that role well. But I mean, some of the dialogues wouldn't, but I think he does what he's supposed to do in service of the storytelling. But this is the only place I like him.
He has a few moments in Filoni's The Clone Wars, but you don't get much of him. And you're
supposed to not like him still.
He's still like a butt basically to everyone. Yeah. He's not a great guy. But in this series he has his scene where he just takes out everything, and it is amazing. You see a lot of him using force speed, both running and like quick punching droids and stuff. One of the things I want more of in Star Wars, and I want to see it more in live action, is the Jedi super run. I think they underuse it, and the way it was animated was sweet there. I mean, I love Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon doing it in The Phantom Menace, in one of the opening scenes. You barely see it,
but you're enough to know that it's there. But I love the super Jedi run of Mace Windu in this battle.
And he uses it a ton, not just running, like he uses it to quickly like punch the crap out of a super battle droid. So he uses a wide range of Jedi tactics, and one thing I do love about this series is that each lightsaber person that uses a lightsaber, every movement that they make whenever they're fighting is always original and
it's choreographed
very beautiful. And it's interesting because there's so many Jedi in this series that it seems like you would get start reusing some stuff, but they constantly are using new moves and just keeping every shot beautiful. And I love that, especially in this Mace scene, because he takes down a ton of super battle droids, an army basically.
Yeah, I think what your point about their fighting styles being unique, which is not easy to do, I would think in animation, and the way they do a really good job, and that helps give it that touch of Arthurian, of a feel to it, of knights, and having individuality. Because the easy thing to do would be to just make them all the same. It would be less time consuming, I'm sure.
And that's something that Lucas was keen on too, especially making Episode 2, was he wanted every Jedi to have his own fighting style, even just in the crowd of Jedi that swarms the arena in Geonosis. And you see them for like 2 seconds on screen, but he was keen about every single character having their own fighting style. And I like that this series keeps that going and just makes sure that every Jedi is original in their fighting style. And then obviously Mace takes down the giant sandcrawler. I mean, battering ram, whatever it is.
It looks like a sandcrawler when it first comes. Expecting Jawa.
He does a very good job of showing the scale of this thing, because this thing's massive. I'm not really sure what its point is. Like, it just kind of hovers over and then just like smashes an army. Its
point is just to show how much of a badass Mace is.
It's true. And obviously he takes that thing down, and then he's kind of showing off to that kid, and he does the classic drink the water without actually touching the cup, hero pose. And then that's the Windu scene. But it's a solid like 10 minutes of Mace just killing everything.
Yeah. And using I like when he dismantles with the Force the inner workings, the nuts and bolts of the one droid, and then uses those as artillery to take out like several more.
He's very creative with his fighting style. And then we jump to Ilum and the crystal temple there, and we kind of get a little bit of lore with Luminara saying this little speech to Barriss as she builds her lightsaber.
Didn't it sound like that little chant was like the lightsaber version of the Jedi Creed? You know, the Jedi Creed, like it was like the little tautology that you do when you're building light. It was similarly, like the phrasing seemed similar.
Yeah, it was kind of like a lightsaber version of fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
Yeah, well, and I was just thinking like the Jedi Creed itself. There is no death, there is the Force. That whole montage.
So I think the Jedi have this thing with just little idioms,
little creeds. Yeah.
And that was kind of cool to see. And then we get them killing a bunch of droids too. And one thing I really like is they fight very similarly in this.
You're talking about
Luminara
and Barriss.
Yeah. Which is really neat because it makes the audience feel like, okay, Barriss is Luminara's student, and that makes sense that they would fight very, very, if not identically, very, very similarly.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish that, because there's a couple of things.
Yeah, I'm done.
Well, the two things back on the lightsaber building. I knew all of us who when we had the original trilogy came out, we knew that Luke had lost his old lightsaber on Bespin, and Maz was there to catch it, of course, with her little box. But we knew he had built a new one because of the skiff when he jumps off the plank on the skiff on Return of the Jedi, and of course R2 launches the green lightsaber to him. He ignites that, and then new lightsaber. He had to have made this or found it or whatever. We of course it's accepted, and we surmise that he built it. And I always thought that he just was in his homestead, wherever that is at that time, with a bench, just kind of putting things together. What I like is how they show them using the Force to put it together. That had never occurred to me before I had seen that, and I thought that gave it more the lightsaber and the relationship to the Jedi more of an enigmatic feel.
And to the Force.
And the Force.
The relationship between the Force, the Jedi, and the lightsaber, and that kind of trio, and how especially in the new canon, the Force has a heavy role in the lightsaber. And that
Kanan just talked about that in the last episode.
And I'm thinking of in the Clone Wars too, they had that 3 or 4 episode series where there was that group of Padawans that went to get their crystals, and then they had to build them, and there was this whole thing with Ahsoka and Yoda. But again, that was something that was carried over into the Clone Wars. With Filoni carried it over when that Padawan series, you build it using the Force, which makes sense just because, it makes sense aesthetically because it looks cool, but it also makes sense because of the relationship between the Jedi, the Force, and the lightsaber. It's all interconnected, and it makes sense that you would use the Force to build the lightsaber. Yeah,
and there's also more of that lore extended in the Ahsoka novel, and of course in the last episode of Rebels, the Darksaber episode, he as he's training Sabine, he talks about it's gotta connect with your mind, and it's an energy current, and she says it's getting lighter, and he basically tells her that it's connecting with her. And when you're talking about the apprentice and Padawan, I like when the rocks are falling on top of Barriss and what's her name? Luminara, sorry. That at first it's just the immediate reaction to try to keep those things propped up. They're looking up, and then Luminara, she just kneels and starts meditating, and Barriss looks at her, and then she follows after her master and does the same thing. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, and they're meditating to keep the rocks up,
yes.
but it's like in more of a controlled pose almost.
In reaching out to the Force to try to get help, because obviously Yoda picks up on it.
Yeah. And I do like that they, despite having blown up a lot of droids when they were fighting, they didn't save the temple. The temple's still destroyed.
It's kind of a casualty.
Like that.
Yeah.
That they didn't feel the need to make sure that, no, the Jedi can't lose, they're the good guys. No, they lost their temple.
I like what you said when we were watching too. You were hinting at how slow Yoda's walking. You're like, hurry up! They're gonna die.
Yeah. So Yoda hears them through the Force, and kind of. Well, he feels, tremors through the Force, that they need to go to Ilum. He's on Padme's ship, and he uses kind of a Force trick to convince her. And
Jedi mind trick.
And it's just like impressing her. So they go, and then Yoda goes off on his own, and he has his own little scene where he kills a bunch of stuff, and that's pretty cool to see Yoda's different perspective, because he cuts
spider
things.
droid kind of things.
He kind of cuts them from the bottom, and it's kind of cool. And then, like I said, he takes forever to walk. I'm like, dude, they're getting crushed by rocks. Like, hurry up, man.
I kind of wish they had used different scenery. I see why they use the snow, but for me, I couldn't detach my mind, because it was literally the only new non-film version of Star Wars that we had. I mean, other than the holiday special, which we don't, it doesn't matter.
We don't talk about that.
But your mind immediately goes to Hoth, and I keep watching, like, why is there a Jedi temple on Hoth? Oh, it's not Hoth, it's Ilum.
Yeah.
Right?
And that is one thing they did change a little bit in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
It's still like an ice planet, but it's not like Hoth. Mm-hmm. And it's not as difficult because you spend a lot of time in the temple and not really outside. But I could see where confusion would come from that.
And it's more colorful too in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's a lot more blue because of the ice. It has more emphasis on the ice than it does on the snow. So then, because of that, Padme feels like she has to go help Yoda, and being an idiot, she just goes out by herself with R2 and 3PO. And they run into some of these spider invisible droids or whatever, and kind of take them down. Padme she uses her cloak to see where they are,
to attract it,
and then she uses 3PO to find where the other two are. And we were talking about this when we were watching. I don't really know why she uses a bomb on the second two.
Because
it only took 2 shots to kill the first one. Like, these things are kind of weak.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because they're more stealth than necessarily tanks.
Yeah.
But I was kind of confused on why she used a bomb, and she could have seriously damaged 3PO. Like, if it takes 2 shots to kill him, 1-2-1-2, and you got him. But they get through it, whatever.
That's our nitpicking of it. Yeah.
Well, I feel like this whole scene is kind of a reason to have Padme in there.
Yeah.
It's a reason to have Padme, 3PO, and R2 in there, so you can get those characters. It's like we can't not have them,
right?
Because they're important.
It shows a little.
It felt kind of pointless.
It shows more of that independent quality that Padme has, that you don't see a lot of. And you don't get to see as much of it in the movies.
I don't like how it's portrayed, though.
Yeah,
it's just kind of fake, and she still feels kind of vulnerable and not really strong on her own. The movie does a better job, but it's still pretty bad. But yeah, and I feel like they're kind of useless too. Like, R2 is just kind of there to say, "Oh, by the way, there's still 2 out there.
Yeah,
there's Jedi approaching. Yeah. Just so you know, heads up." So, and really in this whole series, those 3 characters are kind of useless throughout the entire thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because
it's just there for them to check in, like you're saying.
But I don't
say we're here too.
I don't really mind that. I kind of like having Jedi and killing a lot of droids and stuff, so I don't really mind that have a lesser part in this. And then, they all get together, they save the Jedi, they get out of there. And then we have Anakin on this jungle planet with Asajj and the clones. And right away, the clones land. He tells them to go scour the jungle, and the clones get picked off one by one. And it's really cool how it cuts back and forth, and you don't even see what's hitting them. It's just the force. They're getting like thrown around and stuff. And I really like that scene a lot. And then Anakin runs back to the ships. They get blown up, and Asajj kind of walks through the flames.
She literally parts the flames, walks through them, and then
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
And
nice
they
entrance.
both stand their lightsabers open, and then they jump into battle, and they jump out of their cloaks as they jump into the battle. It's a really cool visual thing. And this lightsaber battle is amazing. They fight through the trees, they fight everywhere, and it's really fantastic.
It's like an aerial Japanese battle, like those movies where they fight and are able to fly.
Yeah, they swing on vines and kind of use the Jedi speed run too a lot to stay balanced on like the sides of the trees as they're like just keep moving and flying around. It's very brutal too because they use a lot of the environment, and it's not so much lightsaber versus lightsaber. It's a lot of kicking each other and using branches and rocks around them. And then ultimately we get to that weird temple thing that they arrive at, and it starts raining, and I really like the rain on the lightsaber, the effect that it gives.
The sound and the little look of the steam.
Yeah. And then they go inside, and it gets darker, and also like it's kind of like dusk on this planet at this point, so it's getting darker as this whole fight's progressing. And they use the light of the lightsabers as when they're flashlights in the temple, and each character kind of gets this hue. You get Asajj, who's like red because she has a red lightsaber, and you have Anakin, who's blue because he has a blue lightsaber, and you kind of get a visual representation of that's the good guy, that's the bad guy,
right?
Kind of red versus blue. And so they fight through this temple again, very brutal, throwing like stairs at each other and chunks of stare at each other and stuff. And then they reach the top, and it's just the music is, the drums are like boom, 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 like getting super intense as you're reaching the climax of this battle, and they're fighting up to the pinnacle of the temple. And once they're outside, there's this big red moon or something, and it shades both characters red.
Right.
And visually, it's kind of foreshadowing of they're kind of both bad guys now.
Right. It's
like
not
Anakin's
subtle.
about to take a bad step, and he loses his lightsaber. And he grabs Asajj's hands as she's pulling him down, and he just uses his metal arm to like squeeze her arm until she drops her lightsaber.
Yeah.
And he just stands there and uses the force to pick it up and then grabs it.
Yeah, that
and
was
then
cool.
He cries out and just brutally attacks Asajj. He literally, I really like this scene because the music's mounting and you get flashes of Qui-Gon, Yoda, and Obi-Wan as he's beating down on Asajj, and he's just slamming her, not using any sense to like try to swing around and kill her basically. He's literally just pounding her until the ground underneath her breaks
gives
and
way,
she drops. That's how she dies, is he literally beats her down until the ground breaks. And it's really intense.
Yeah. I like how just before that pinnacle part, or the drums and music come in heavy, there's a lot of it's not soundtracked musically, and it helps. They do that really good in Star Wars in general. I mean, if you go back to like Empire, a lot of that lightsaber battle.
Often it's
pretty
not.
Much all of it.
There's no music until they start fighting again.
Until someone loses an arm, but or the ground they're standing on. But it was well spotted for the music, and that moment, like they saved the music for when they needed it, and then when they brought in pretty much full bore and made it more intense. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I saw it, originally I wasn't sure whether to let you see it when you were a toddler, and just beginning to watch shows. I mean, you probably just got done watching Blue's Clues when you'd seen some of these.
Here's Blue's Clues. Now here's Asajj dying.
Yeah. But yeah, that was it was pretty intense.
It's a really good foreshadowing of what Anakin becomes.
Yeah, because they show him blue, and that's where I think that when they have that minimalistic kind of lighting when they're inside the temple, which is kind of interesting too on another level of spirituality. They're both in a temple, both coming from different orders. They're both lit up by the order that they represent. And
then once they're outside, they're both red. Then
the red overtakes, and it's the moon is huge. It's massive. It's so close. You would think it was like in orbit. It's breaking the orbit.
At breaking atmosphere.
Breaking atmosphere. Thanks for. To bring the point home that this is now becoming a part of who Anakin is this these little seeds of the dark side. So,
and I don't know why there's flashes of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, but I really like it too. Because each stroke there will be like a flash of either Qui-Gon, Yoda, or Obi-Wan.
I think they've all three been his mentor. I mean, obviously Obi-Wan is the master that's logged in the most hours with him, but we know from, of course, his first mentor was Qui-Gon. Then you have Obi-Wan, but we know
and Yoda teaches all.
Yoda teaches all. He's connected. Like, obviously, he teaches the younglings, and he's involved with all of them. But you also know that Yoda, from a lot of material, not just in the movies, but elsewhere as well, he has a vested interest in kind of keeping a closer watch on Anakin. And we know you get the sense from his meeting in Revenge of the Sith. Remember when Anakin comes to Yoda and Yoda gives him the most worthless advice he could have given him, and it was just reciting a bunch of Jedi
it's almost
dogma.
Like that's like a meeting set per week or something like that.
Yeah, you get this. You just get the sense that they've had more conversations like that. But of course, Yoda just gives him Jedi dogma and crams it down his throat, and instead of kind of listening to hear what what was going on behind. But you get the sense that they've had conversations, that he trusts Yoda and likes to get another opinion because he knows what Obi-Wan's gonna say. So those three characters.
Qui-Gon's dead. So.
Yeah, Qui-Gon's dead. He dead.
And I think too it's really interesting because they're kind of observing as he's just letting in this dark side of him. He's almost letting them down. And Yoda, especially in the flashes, he looks like surprised and worried. His eyes are super wide. He's like, don't do this. And then the ground cracks and she falls and he just kind of cries out with all this pent up rage.
Yeah. One more thing on Qui-Gon. His voice was there when Anakin had slaughtered the Tusken Raider. So, he even in the mythos of Anakin doing bad things, it's that.
Yeah, and Qui-Gon comes back sort of later in the series. He has a brief thing that's important to Anakin's character in season 2 or volume 2. So, but with that, we'll leave it.
Well, great. One of the things, if there's not a bunch of news this coming week, maybe next week we'll go further again with Clone Wars, try to get some more of it logged in, and maybe we'll revisit Rebels a little bit. We'll just bring up some loose items. We never talked about the mid-season trailer. We could talk about that, maybe, because there were only a couple episodes released after the mid-season trailer. So maybe we can revisit that, check it out, and because I know there's some things that, I wanted to discuss with you on that.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we never did talk about that on the podcast. So, I don't have anything else. You can find us on Facebook. Look up Go Star Wars. You can find us on Twitter at Go Star Wars and
Instagram at Go Star Wars 2016 and
email.
YouTube Go Star Wars.
And what about email?
Go Star Wars 2016 at Gmail.
yeah, so send us if there's anything on your mind you want us to talk about. Let us know. We'll be glad to bring that kind of bring questions to the table and discuss them. And you know what you all must be doing until the next time. Pass on what you have learned.
And that's a wrap.